Well, good morning, everybody. Following on Director Benarott, I say welcome to the Edina Housing Redevelopment Authority meeting for May 16th, 2024. It is 7:31, and there is sometimes an opportunity to participate twice in an HRA meeting or a City Council meeting when we have a public hearing. There's no public hearing matter this morning in the HRA, so there'll be a chance for community comment with respect to anything that's on your mind that isn't already on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing before the HRA. Otherwise, we're welcoming you to give us your thoughts and your concerns, and you'll have 3 minutes to do that, and you'll get a yellow warning light when you've got about 30 seconds to wrap up your comments. So just a reminder, it can't be on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing to be able to make those public comments. Also, people are listening online, and we've been doing this all the way through COVID and post-COVID. There's your call-in information in front of you on the screen. And this will come up fast right after the approval of the meeting agenda for community comments, so you should be jotting down those numbers at this point in time. We'll get them back on the screen when we get to that portion of the meeting as well. Having provided that information, we'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask our Administrative Support Specialist, Liz Olson, to call the roll.
Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And next we have the meeting agenda to approve. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to modify the meeting agenda in any form or fashion? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds approval of the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we are at community comment. And is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward and address the HRA on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing? Anybody online?
I do not have anyone on the line at this time, but because there is a short delay in the broadcast, I would recommend we wait 1 minute before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:33, so I will come back to you at 7:34 or when we have a caller, whichever's first.
Thank you.
It is now 7:34, and I still don't have a caller, so I think it's safe for you to move forward with the agenda.
All right, thank you. Our practice is when we've had a HRA meeting or a city council meeting that we answer those concerns of residents in a relatively short period of time online, and then we follow that up with either our city manager or executive director's response to those community comments, and we'll do that this morning with respect to the prior meeting.
None to report today.
Nothing to report. All right, very good. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's a couple items on the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those items on the consent agenda are adopted and approved. And then we are going to move to the heart of the meeting this morning, and that is the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. We've got some things to cover there. And then we've got some updates for the HRA as well on a few matters that have been worked on either legislatively or locally. And so let's start with our Economic Development Manager, Bill Neuendorf, who's been really quite busy with a lot of different things lately. And we've got some matters in front of us this morning to discuss that are kind of at the heart of a couple of different things that we've tried to work on in terms of small business support. So Manager Neuendorf, welcome, and look forward to your presentation.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I'm here this morning with a few items. The first few are grant agreements for a new small business to be located up in the 44th and France neighborhood. These grants will be funded through our Spark program. And it's been a while since we funded a project with Spark, and so I wanted to provide a brief update on how that project or how that program works, and I'll also be happy to get into where the funds came from and how they can be spent. So I'll provide the background first, and then we'll proceed with the actual grant agreements. The grantees are both available here today with us to answer any questions when we get to that phase. The Spark program was created back in 2021 and 2022, and that was based on state legislation that was passed during the COVID era. And it was special legislation approved statewide to support business growth, business investment, and job creation. In Edina, we had $9.6 million available to pool together to create this Spark fund. Those monies came from existing tax increment financing districts, and those were dollars that had already been levied, already been collected, and had already been sitting in a fund within the city. The largest pool of funds came from the Southdale 2 district. Southdale, Galleria, all the commercial properties that surround it. About $8.6 million came from that fund. The Pentagon Park fund down on 77th Street contributed just under $700,000 into that pool. And then finally, we had an older set of districts that we collectively called 70th and Cahill that had just under $350,000 available. And that 70th and Cahill district there's a long history there, but it actually, the dollars started off from the Wooddale Valley View neighborhood, from the 44th and France neighborhood, and the 70th and Cahill neighborhood. And over time, when those TIF districts were decertified, just for simplicity's sake and for bookkeeping, we've just referred to them as 70th and Cahill. But back in the day, they did come from three different neighborhoods in Edina. So those are the dollars that we have available. We have committed some of it already to the Edina Theater, to that new Finch project to provide access to the Fred Richards Park, a few other projects that we've provided funding from the Spark program. On the slide, it shows the various ways that Spark can be used. The legislation was quite broad, but there's two fundamentals. Invest in brick and mortar construction in your community and create jobs in the process. So we can provide grants, loans, forgivable loans, equity investments. There's quite an array of different tools that we could use. For simplicity's sake and to actually get these dollars out in the community, we've grouped them into three categories. What we're rolling out today is the most simple program that I'm calling the Streamlined Grant Program. These are grants up to $24,000 that would assist in building improvements to the shell of the building, not necessarily interior tenant spaces, but the doors, the windows, the roof, the parking, the things that will always be in Edina. The program is set up to be, as the name implies, simple and streamlined. Small businesses don't need to be bogged down in piles and piles of paperwork for a simple project. The second category is forgivable loans. Those would be larger loans in the $150,000 range. These numbers are actually flexible. I'll get into that in the next slide. And then the larger program is the Spark Investment Fund or the Spark Investment Program. And those would be loans, forgivable loans, grants, et cetera, that are much larger in size for more challenging projects. I'm not going to read through all these slides, so don't worry about that. But for the Streamlined Grant Program, these are the basic criteria that we're looking at. And I shaped this set of criteria to be simple to the small business. So the reason we selected $24,000 as the cap is that based on state subsidy laws, any subsidy less than $25,000 is not considered a subsidy, and you essentially are exempt from years of reporting. For a small business, we don't need years of reporting. We need ability to open the doors and get running. So that's why we selected the $24,000. It's applicable to commercial and industrial businesses, really focusing on reoccupying vacant space. When you reoccupy that space, you're creating jobs, you're adding to the community, you're adding to the economy, and that's what we're really aiming at. The rollout of the program is intended to be prompt. So in the grant agreements that are in the packet, you'll notice that work has to begin very promptly and be completed within a year. Of course, we still want to be transparent and responsible with the dollars. So the business is required to contract for the work, comply with permits, codes, all those types of things, complete the work, pay the contractor, make sure people get paid. Then they'll show us an invoice of what they've done, and we'll reimburse them at that point. So we want to make sure that the grantee follows through on what they said. And then even in the worst case scenario, if that business would go out of business, those brick and mortar investments are still there for the next person that comes in the door. So we feel that we're well protected there. In the overall scheme of the Spark program, I've allocated about $300,000 for this program. So the intention is that we would hope to serve businesses throughout the community as they run into hurdles. And that's one other thing to make sure that I touch on is hurdles. We're not just handing out free money, right? So in this particular case, I met with the owner and the landlord on a handful of occasions early in the process, where they thought they were running, they thought they'd have their doors open already, and then they ran into hurdles and challenges and more costs and unexpected changes that were nowhere on the radar screen that threatened to kill the project. There has to be a demonstrated need that without these monies, the project cannot move forward, and that's fundamental to any of our programs. And then a quick overview of the forgivable loan program. This gets a little bit more complicated. So we're looking at investments from the Spark program in the six figures. I've penciled in $149,000. Once you hit $150,000, that triggers another set of state mandated criteria. Sometimes you need to do that. So far, we're trying to avoid getting bogged down in a lot of red tape. Again, we still want to be transparent and responsible, but that's why I selected the $149,000 as the target. This program would be larger in nature, so it would cover shell improvements, doors, windows, roofs, et cetera, as well as interior improvements. It cannot cover things like equipment, staffing, decorations, tables, chairs, computers, those types of things. It has to be physical construction. Since this dollar amount is greater, we've structured it as a forgivable loan, where we would provide the funding after the work is completed and paid for, but the business would have to basically issue a guarantee that they will remain in business and they will keep doing what they're doing. If they default, the forgivable loan is no longer forgiven. It's payable back to us then. And then the last program is the largest one. This is our Spark Investment Program. This is really intended for larger and more challenging projects. We would use the funds for any eligible purpose. It would most likely be deemed to be a business subsidy. We'd have to follow through with all the reporting, job creation numbers, annual check-ins, annual reports, those types of things. But the basic fundamentals are the same. We want to use these dollars to attract and encourage new businesses to either invest in Edina or existing Edina businesses to expand. You might recall about a year ago, we were negotiating with a hotel that was running into funding issues, and this was the program that we had hoped to use at that point. Ultimately, that project ran into a number of different hurdles that our money could not overcome. But as we move forward with any of these programs, the intention is that staff would work with the applicants to better understand the projects and the needs. We'd make sure that they're eligible to receive some of these monies, and then we'd work with our attorney to get grant agreements or loan agreements prepared, and we'd always bring those agreements to you. In terms of the streamlined grant program, we have a pretty simple template. I forgot the page count, but it's like a dozen pages. In legalese, that means it's very brief. Some of these larger grant agreements, I mean, they'll be more detailed, more commitments, and those will be custom written for the project. But for these streamlined programs, the 2 grant agreements we'll look at today, you notice are virtually exactly the same except for the name of the applicant and the dollar amount. But in the future, we'll certainly bring those agreement to you for review, consideration. You are, of course, welcome to approve them or reject them. That's always in your court. But after that agreement is approved, then it's up to the applicant to get the work contracted, to get it built, to meet all the requirements, to pay their subs, and then submit a disbursement request to us along with documentation that they did everything they said they were going to do. And then at that point, staff can go and work with them and issue the payment. We would have a check-in with you at the end of the program where you would issue a certificate of completion. So that's something we don't intend to bring into the full board. I think that the chair and secretary can sign off on that, especially on these smaller grants. But then we would issue the payment, and we'd, of course, do check-in for some of those larger programs. So that's the process that we have in mind. That's a process we've worked through so far with the three programs we've already funded. And before I jump to the specifics of this morning, I wonder if there's any questions on the overall intent here or the programs.
Thanks for that. Questions from commissioners? I know one thing I always wonder about is this was, as I recall from the legislature, use it or lose it by a date certain. And we've got, what was that? Was it December 31st of 2025?
That's correct. We have to commit the funds to specific projects by the end of December 2025. Any funds that we do not commit, we don't necessarily have to have the dollars paid, as we've learned, but we have to be under contract and they need to be moving. If we don't commit those funds, we return them back to Hennepin County, and then they're dispersed through the normal process.
All right. Okay. Commissioner Risser, then
And
Commissioner
just
Jackson.
to be clear, the normal process would mean that those funds would go back to Edina schools or Richfield schools, the watershed districts, as well as the city of Edina.
Similar, the normal process, since these are TIF dollars initially, they're still considered TIF dollars until they're spent. But if we turn them back to the county, how it typically works is that the dollar amount is split into thirds. A third is retained by the county, goes into their general fund to do what they want to do with it. A third is returned to the city of Edina to go into our general fund. And then a third is distributed to the school districts, either Richfield or Edina, wherever the dollars originated from. There's no dollars given or returned to the watershed or the mosquito abatement district or the park board or any of those smaller taxing entities. That's just how state law is set up. But it would go to the schools, the county, and the city. One thing we learned when we initiated this effort a few years ago was while the dollars are paid out to the schools, that's a special funding situation that we learned quite a bit about a few years ago. We thought it might be a nice nest egg for all these taxing agencies. What we found with the schools is that any dollars returned to the schools in one year are then taken away from the schools the next year in their state funding. And so there's not that windfall that any taxing agency would have expected. So that was a disappointment when we learned that that's how it worked, but that's how it works.
What happens to the money that goes back to the city coffers? Is there any downfall? Like what happens to the schools?
No, that state law only applies to schools. So the third of the dollars that would be returned to the city and the county would go to those respective general funds, and the elected officials could decide what to do with those dollars. There's no restrictions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, two questions. One is the reimbursement in these agreements is we are reimbursing the business for the costs that they've already incurred, right? So I think I misread this when I was reading through it in preparation, but that's how that works, correct?
That's correct, yes. It would definitely be a reimbursement. We just want to be transparent. So I've seen and implemented other programs where the dollars are paid out early. That is really being business friendly, because small businesses, I mean, they'll have to dig deeper or go to family or their banker and get the monies, pay the interest, pay the debt, and then we'll reimburse them, and then they can write it off, or then they can clean it up. But just for transparency's sake and responsibility with public dollars, I felt it was best that the grantee essentially be on the hook for the investment. We'll reimburse them once they can show us the paperwork that the work is finished and the dollars have been paid out. Then we'll certainly reimburse them.
And when I misread it, it was, the grant is a grant, and it's paid, and we're done.
And we're done. Yep.
Okay, and then this is a little bit more esoteric, but do we invite Spark recipients to apply for the green business recognition? It's completely optional, but I hope that we'll have that conversation. When
We certainly can, yes. We've been rolling it out with press releases. I'll make sure I forward that to the grantees this morning.
Okay, and similarly, when we recognize someone as a green business, we give them a little logo that they can use, a sticker for their windows or something they can use on their website. Do we do anything like that with the Spark? We've got this great logo here. Do we give them a sticker that they can put on their window if they so desire?
We do not. I suppose we could do that. So far, we've only funded a couple projects. So at the Edina Theater, we didn't ask for any special recognition. At the Edina Chamber of Commerce and their Business Innovation Lab, we asked to be named as a founding sponsor. So when you walk into their space, there'll be the big Edina logo as the founding sponsor or one of the founding sponsors. And for the Finch, we didn't ask anything special because we'll essentially own that road that's being constructed. So we could certainly create some stickers if that's helpful, but we've not done that in the past.
Yeah, I'd just be interested in the conversation with the grantees if they'd appreciate that or not. So I'd love to see it, of course, because I'm proud of the program. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Pierce.
Just one clarifying question on, so 2025, any of the funds that are not used, you talked about how they're dispersed. What time frame does that happen within? Is it the first of the year, middle of the year?
The state law is a one-time legislation that is a bit vague. Okay. So what the law says is that the funds must be committed by December 31st of 2025. So how we've been interpreting that is that we need to have executed contracts with bona fide recipients, and the work must be started. We might pay out the work in early 26, but once we get to January 1st of 2026, we cannot, any funds would have to be returned that have not been obligated. Are the funds due January 1st, February 1st? We just need to be responsive. There is no specific deadline in the legislation.
So that would probably be sometime in 2026 when the...
I would say first quarter of 26.
Yeah, okay. And then last question. I know we haven't used the program extensively, so it's been fairly light. What are we doing to ask the community or go out and see if there are other projects that we can fund? The one that I will say probably every other week, somebody says something to me about the Edina Theater. Like, it's happened twice this week already. And it's just fun to be able to say, yeah, that's something that we help bring back through this program. And so what are we doing to look for other great opportunities to use these dollars?
Yeah. So So far, what we've been doing is having conversations with projects that come in our doors, right? Like in this particular case, they had already applied for the permit, and all of a sudden, the scope of their work started to spiral out of control. So that was one that was already here. I've also been working with landowners of vacant or underutilized parcels to see where they are, to see who their prospects are there things we can do? We have not done just a general cold call kind of blanket approach. The information is available on our website. We will update that. By this point in time, in May of 2024, I had thought we'd be a lot further along in our obligations to this program. The last year has been very difficult with new projects. So my intention moving forward is to really start getting more of the word out there through some public press releases, working through brokers, working through owners. When this program was adopted back in a few years ago, the intention was to deploy the dollars rather than turning it back to the county and having it kind of watered down. We really wanted the dollars invested here in Edina to grow Edina. So as we get closer to that end of 2025 deadline, I'm on the path to try to find projects for every dollar that's out there. As far as general outreach to the community, I've not really reached out to residents. That's not. I mean, this is really for business owners, investors. Certainly, some of the folks are residents, or they own multiple properties here, or single properties. So there's usually ties like that. But we'll certainly promote. We'll certainly amplify our promotion of this program because we want this used.
Thank you. Back to Commissioner Risser.
First, I want to thank you for the breakdown of the financial amounts for the different districts. And I understand since the 70th and Cahill was $350,000, Wooddale Valley View would have been less than that. We don't have those breakdowns for that. But with Southdale being 8.6 million, and then I'm looking at language from our website about Spark. This spending plan identifies approximately $9,650,000 of unallocated monies generated from 3 TIF districts located within Southeast Edina relevant redevelopment project area, the Southeast Edina redevelopment project area. And one of the things that is concerning to me is so many of the projects are outside of Southeast Edina, and we're really heavy in Northeast Edina. And, just thinking about where those property tax revenues came from, it would be good to see more investment in Southeast Edina moving forward. So that is one concern. The other concern I have is when we establish TIF districts, we have public hearing, and this is all about the lack of what I think would be logical coming from process that the legislature is set up. So it's not on city staff or anything, but we don't have a public hearing when it comes to allocating these unused TIF funds. And I am hearing from some residents that they are getting very concerned about, how this process is playing out. So I understand today we're looking at a relatively small amount compared to, 6 figures that we've done in the past. But, it really feels like we're kind of in this uncomfortable area where we just get to be the deciders and the public is really left out. So I wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
If I could respond and clarify to a couple points. So bear with me. So Southeast Edina. To many people, when we refer to Southeast Edina, you look at that southeastern quadrant, east of 100, south of the crosstown. In the HRA nomenclature, there's the Southeast Edina redevelopment project area. And that's a different geographic boundary than we often refer to. So the Southeast Edina redevelopment project area has boundaries that include, it stretches all the way west to Cahill, includes the 70th and Cahill District, meanders up to Grandview, gets all the Grandview District, goes over to Northeast Edina, 50th in France, 44th in France, 54th in France. So the language in the official documents is not what you might look at a traditional map. So apologies for the confusion there, but that's that. And the other matter is public hearings. So when we first established the Spark program, we held public hearings as required by law. I forgot the dates. It was sometime in late 2021 or early 2022, but that was a condition that public hearings be held, and we certainly did do that. The other piece out there is if we do get into larger grants, we have to have public hearings. So once that business subsidy law is triggered, and so far all of our projects have come in for the most part below that, but if we do a bigger project, then we're compelled to do public hearings, and we will do public hearings. But for programs like this one, the Streamline Grant at $24,000, it falls far below the threshold of any state mandate for public hearings. So that's a bit of background on those two items.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I did not mean to say there hadn't been for the process that was required, but the other, is the Richfield Public School District, on property tax revenue that would have gone to Richfield and then going into the programs and kind of ending up being dedicated to projects that are outside of the Richfield Public School District. So there's a lot that is going on that is concerning, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Others? Yeah, so I think this sort of backgrounding again periodically is good to have. And you've got what amount generally left in the fund?
So we have about $4.5 million still unobligated. So we can do a lot of good things in this community, in any district, in any school district, in any watershed district. We can certainly roll it out in all those. The tough thing is, I had approached a variety of projects. They didn't need the money. So there was a couple projects in the Southdale area. They were fully financed. They didn't need government assistance. Frankly, for years, I've been trying to work with the convention grill owners to move that project along. They didn't need the money, and the owner didn't want the money. He was going to do it his way on his time. So there's some times when you work hard to try to distribute it, and the owners just don't want to get involved, or they don't need it. And need is the number one thing, in my opinion. We want to use these dollars to push projects forward that otherwise would not happen.
Just an observation that when the legislature created this opportunity for us years ago during I think it was during COVID, when things were being, things were more challenging, it really is a nice opportunity to put people to work and keep people working from a construction standpoint at, high-paying jobs. And so it has really some wonderful aspects to it. So, and then at the end of the day, what we don't use, we get to use a different way. And so there's a lot of wins here. So thanks for that backgrounding. So let's talk a little bit about what you have in mind with respect to OCREP. And I met the owner, I think, last winter at a gathering of a bunch of Francophiles, Belgian and French, I think, at a home in Minneapolis. And it was kind of a opportunistic conversation, and I've been driving by there or going over there to get a haircut and keep waiting for things to get going, but eager to hear from her this morning too. So to let you set the background for that.
Great, yeah, so the action items this morning are on these two grant agreements. So it's the same project, and that's the reoccupancy and updating of the old Caribou Coffee space at 44th and France. So the new business is called OCREP. I'm recommending that we provide a grant to the tenant and to the landlord. The space has been vacant for some time. The owner and landlord, or landlord and tenant, are already under contract. They're ready to get going. They've started doing the prep work. They want to keep going with it. But the site is shown here on the screen, site and location. So right at the corner of Sunnyside and France. The scope of work has to do with energy efficiency and handicap access. So part of the backstory is initially the tenant and the owner thought it was always used as a coffee shop. We want to reuse it as a coffee shop. We're going to just give it this new French twist, and how hard can it be? Well, once you start coming in for permits, you find out it can get really hard really quickly. So that space was last remodeled prior to the adoption of the ADA. And so while there is a small ramp to get in the front door, like the sidewalk slopes up, it's very steep, it's too narrow, the jamb doesn't comply, the door doesn't comply, the opener doesn't comply, the windows don't comply. All of a sudden, you're looking at about a $20,000 fix, and this was the inexpensive version. They initially wanted to do something at the back, and that was far more expensive to do something on the back that actually would have taken away parking and created difficulties, solve one problem, create three other ones. So working with our building department and their architect and contractor, it was decided to focus on the front door. Once you touch the front door, now you're touching the windows. The windows are enormous and expensive, so again, it kind of snowballs. The other thing that was that I think started our conversation was sack and whack. Closing one coffee shop, reopening another one, how hard can it be? It also triggers sack and whack with Met Council. And this building was built in the 1920s. When Caribou moved in the 1991 or whenever that was, early 90s, the SAC record-keeping system wasn't great, so no one's been able to find whether or not they ever paid SAC. And in that condition, Met Council always defaults into, well, you must not have paid it because we can't find a record. So that's another $18,000 with no impact to the business other than it's just another hurdle. So that's where we started our conversation, and then it propelled to the handicap accessibility. Working with the landlord, the rear parking lot is still a problem. The handicap parking stall is difficult to access. It's doubtful that it complies with current codes. The biggest hindrance is that the parking lot was built so that there's about an 8-inch step from the parking lot to the back door of this tenant space and every other tenant space. So the landlord is willing at this time, it can't fall into the tenant budget, but the landlord is willing to do it, go in and repave and regrade that entire parking lot. So it's not just paving for paving's sake, but it's getting rid of that 8-inch step. Again, how hard can that be? It's not hard, it's just expensive. And there's no rent increase, there's no revenue increase. But with this program, we really hope to improve the access to this entire building, focusing on this tenant space because this is where the new jobs are. But both the owner and landlord are here this morning in case there's any questions. The full grant agreements are in your packet. You'll find they're based on the same template, so the only thing that changes is the scope of the work and the name of the grantee. But on the tenant side, the scope is to remodel and reoccupy that vacant space to create jobs. They'll be creating about 6 new jobs in that space. The owner's investment is so far $140,000. We're actually higher than that, but as far as brick and mortar construction, that's about where we are. The cost of these new ADA improvements are about $18,000. So the grant would cover those costs. And if there's another surprise and it goes up a little bit, we could cover that as well, but not to exceed that $24,000. And they, as you mentioned, they started demo. They're ready to go. So they're looking to open in June, and it's May 16th. So they're itching to go. On the landlord side, it's reconstruction of that rear parking lot. And again, the contract is clear that it doesn't say repaving, it says reconstruction, because we want to get rid of that step. The cost of that work is around $40,000. Hopefully, the contractor can get it done for that price. We would pay half of that, not to exceed the $24,000 cap. The job created here are not due to the parking lot itself, but the parking lot is necessary for the new business. The timing of that project has not been set in stone yet. We want to work with the tenant, get them opened, but that work would likely happen later this year. But it must be done within a year per the terms of the grant agreement. So I've been working on this one for a while. The owner and tenant are ready to go. They're here with us this morning. I certainly recommend that the board approve both of these grant agreements, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any
All right,
questions.
thank you. Questions for Manager Newendorf? Yes, Commissioner.
Yes,
ahead.
just briefly, this is where the term reimbursable grant got into my studies. I think maybe we should call it a reimbursement grant, because the grant is a grant and it's not coming back to us. And I think it's confusing to call it a reimbursable grant. So I know it's not in the document, in the actual agreement, but when we talk about it, I would prefer that.
Okay.
So, great, thank
Happy
you.
to.
Yeah, just to echo that was my question and concern too. Just to make it clear, because it's really confusing when you kind of read through it, that you think it's coming back and it's not.
Other thoughts at this point in time? Do you want to have the applicants come forward too, and we can? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you. So is the entire block of this site owned by the Arbor Sunnyside properties? Like, I'm thinking the entire stretch of the buildings.
What's owned by Arbor Sunnyside is the corner from the Brugger's Bagels to the Gear Running and the Barber Shop.
Okay, so
So I
once
think
we
there's
hit
4
Snap
tenants.
Fitness, it's a different management.
Right, yeah, there's actually 4 owners on this portion of the block. Each building is owned separately.
Okay, thank you. And what do you think the future of this entire block is looking like right now? I was kind of surprised to hear, how old some of these buildings are. So do you see any type of evolution, whether it's building up or otherwise? Like, in your experience, what's the future of this block?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. From a real estate perspective, there's probably a higher and better use for that entire block. When we did the 44th and France small area plan, the neighbors in the community generally like that existing scale, especially on the corners. So the buildings are not deemed technically historic, but I think people like that scale. At this time, I've heard of no plan to consolidate and tear them down and do something bigger. If there was something catastrophic, there's a big fire that takes out one of the buildings, I think it totally would change the conversation. But at this point, you look at the occupancy, they're all leased, and some of the leases roll sometimes, but a lot of well-loved businesses there. So I don't foresee a lot of change. I think we'll have the same ongoing, just the reoccupancy. Some tenants come out, other tenants come in. Some tenants say there's too much parking, others say there's not enough parking. Some people say the sidewalk's too narrow, some people say it's fine. I think we're going to have those same conversations for these properties for quite some time.
I think that's a good observation, a good recollection on the small area plan study, because my recollection was the same, that folks in the neighborhood wanted to keep not only that scale, but that look, that aesthetic feel, and that's why the Lorient looks like it fits in the neighborhood, and it doesn't, it's proportional, and that's why if you march south, that next building to the south was done the same way, to have that kind of 1920s to 1950 look to it. And so that I expect too that this will continue to look the way it looks in the future. And I think, wasn't that the first Caribou Coffee in the?
It was.
The whole
Yes,
system?
that was Caribou Coffee #1. Yeah. So it was a sad day when they closed, but they had that was a corporate decision. I think a lot of people were expecting it to have closed earlier. They really had not put much into that property. Their focus is really drive-throughs.
Well, maybe Oak Crep will have a little plaque on the wall there.
In 30 years, we might say that was the
Find
first
that
Oak
out.
Crop.
Maybe we'll bring them forward here to. Folks, why don't you come up and tell us a little bit about the situation with you, and you are the tenant. Nice to see you again. Introduce yourself and give us your address and Tell us about your experience. You're already in this business in another part of town, as I recall. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Claire Corvézier. I'm originally from France. I'm from Brittany, France, which is the part of France where crepes originated. I take a lot of pride to say that I'm from that region because we have a lot of cultural heritage, and it's been great to be spreading that around Minnesota. I moved to the US about almost 20 years ago now, but I've been in Minnesota for 10 years. This is where my kids were born.
Take your time. And you started
It's
another
been,
business. It
it's
wasn't
been-
just enough having kids, then you started in business
I
too.
know. Yeah, they were born at Southdale in Edina. It's always been a really wonderful state to be here. I created my business because I am passionate about crepes, and they're delicious, and I think everyone should have them. When I found this opportunity here in Edina, I thought this was going to be a perfect spot for me. I love actually the look of the building. It really reminds me of home. It's an older building, and I just really like how none of the space inside is conformed to, even the angles are all different. It's very difficult to build in it, but it's really fun to have that charm. Yeah, sorry, I lost it a little bit. Yeah, I'm just very excited to be part of this community and hopefully grow my business here in Edina, hire wonderful people here in Edina. My kids go to Normandale, right down the block, so it's just wonderful to bring what I'm passionate about to the community. So, do you have any questions?
And you've had some surprises over there when you went to get a building permit, it sounds like, and had some unanticipated costs.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is because, Caribou was there for so long. Everything has changed since then. So we had to just do a lot more work than we thought. We thought we could do a little cosmetic work and open right away, which was really what I wanted to do. But after meeting with the health inspector and the building inspector, we realized that we had a lot more work to do than we thought. And so our expenses just kept growing. But the city of Edina has been really great to work with. Bill has spent a lot of time with us explaining how this whole thing works, and we are I'm a new business owner here, especially with the brick and mortar location. That's not what I've done in the past, so it's a little intimidating, but it's been really wonderful to work with everybody here in Edina and getting a lot of help from everyone. So yes, we had some bumps on the road, but I have no doubt that we're gonna get over the bumps, open the location, and really bring back to the community. So I'm excited about that part. I'm excited to meet our guests and meet them, greet them by the names, and offer them what they want to get when they come see us.
And you have another business, another location, as I recall.
So it's a partnership with the Minneapolis Cider Company. I opened my business in 2018, and I started on farmers markets first. My kids were really young back then, so that was an easy thing for me to do. I also was new to this community and business owner. And then in 2020, I met with the three partners at Minneapolis Cider Company, and they make wonderful cider. You should go and try it. But originally and traditionally in France, you pair crepes with cider. So we met, I kind of told them the backstory of this, and they thought, well, we don't have food, but we have cider. You have the crepes that go with the cider. Why don't we partner together? So in 2020, we did this partnership, and now we have crepes inside Minneapolis Cider Company, 7 days a week. We have a team of 14 crepe masters that I have trained and who make delicious crepes there. So that's been a really great opportunity for me to learn more about really running that food business in a brick and mortar without having the investment or rent even. But it's been really, showed me that that's what I want to do within my own space. My vision for the place here in Edina is to have that small, very cozy, welcoming French bistro vibe that just gives you that French vibe when you walk into it. And, if you can't travel to France once a year, then you just walk in and have that feel. So this is exactly what I want to create here with this Crepe location.
Many people have traveled abroad and had crepe in different locations, and Brittany is the home of crepe, I think you said, and it's not just a flour, it's a buckwheat, as I recall too, is what you told me.
Yeah, so our savory crepes are made with buckwheat flour, which is a gluten-friendly option as well. This is how it is traditionally made, so I'm not trying to actually make it gluten-free necessarily. It's just the tradition is that all of our savory crepes I made with buckwheat flour and water. It's very allergen-friendly. And then our sweet crepes are not allergen-friendly. They're made with wheat, eggs, butter, and milk. But we make they're two very different products. Our savory crepes, that's what I take the most pride in because it's so unique. And a lot of people are interested in learning more about it. When I started my business, I was told, don't even bother with the buckwheat, you should just stick with wheat. It's going to be appealing to the American public. And I thought, oh my gosh, we can't do this. It's too delicious to not make it here. And as soon as I started, people loved it. And I did the Edina Farmers Market, Fall into the Art Festival, Edina Art Fair, and I had so much great feedback from people that I knew that was the right thing to do. So yes, we have two very different crepes, and it's what's wonderful too is that because of the buckwheat, we have that gluten-friendly option. So we are appealing to a brighter, customer base and clientele.
Other questions for Ms. Courvoisier? All right, very good. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
How about the owner? Is the
Thank you.
building owner here, Joe? Morning.
Good morning. My name is Steve Young with Arbor Commercial Group. Live about a half mile away, 3844 York Avenue South. I've owned the building for about 13 years now, so we're very excited about Claire coming in. She's, as you can, quite committed to delivering a very unique product, and I think it will be nice for the city of Edina to have her in business.
And then your work with the parking lot, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And many of you know the building, and if you probably don't notice, but there is a step required to the backs of almost all the businesses, and it's a challenge for those who need or a challenge for people with steps. So when of course the building is all grandfathered in, but when Bill told me about this unique opportunity to fix the problem for all the businesses, then I started looking into it and figured out a way to make it work. So
Would the work in the parking lot, the reconstruction would take care of the step issue from Dick's Barbers and the running store and
all the way down.
All the way down.
Right.
The whole thing. Okay.
And it would, and then the grading is such that it would work out as well. So we're fortunate to run into Bill in this unique program you have.
Any questions for Mr. Young? Good. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Anyone else you want us to visit with regarding these matters? Okay, you've got a couple of requests for us here. You want us to approve the grant agreement with both Oak Crep and Arbor Sunnyside properties. Is that correct? Right. All right. Do you want to take them one at a time or together, or how do you want to handle it? All right. So with respect to the potential grant agreement with Oak Crep LLC, is there a motion to approve that grant agreement?
So, second?
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Agnew seconds the approval of the grant agreement with Oak Crep LLC. Discussion. Barissa.
Okay, I am conflicted on this. You know, I think, you know, on the one hand, this is a wonderful project, but what I'm concerned about is the way that we have been using TIF, the way we have been using unallocated monies, and, you know, not thinking about the impact to the source where the TIF revenue came from. And so I just want to get that out there. I know that and again, I've heard from people, you know, who are saying, these are our property taxes, this is, you know, why is this happening? And there's frustration out there, although I know there's also a lot of people who are really excited and enthusiastic about this as well. So I just want to get that out there. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to abstain or go negative. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know, Manager Newendorf, if you want to address that concern of Commissioner Risser at all, and how this opportunity arose. I mean, we talked about that some this morning, but if you have any additional comments.
I don't have much to add. I mean, about 15 years ago, Edina made this, as a community, made the decision to expand the boundaries of that southeast Edina redevelopment project area to not just be Centennial Lakes, but to actually be the commercial districts. So that's a long-standing precedence. The reason I feel good about recommending these projects is, and part of the reason I've been working on with these folks for so long is, these dollars originated on this block. I mean, this dates back 30 years. But some of these tax dollars that we pooled into the Spark Fund started at 44th and France. They started at Wooddale. They started at 70th and Cahill, Pentagon, and the whole Southdale area. So I think we've got a longstanding precedence, and I think it flows nicely. But certainly some people may disagree, and I can't change people's opinions, but I feel solid that we're following our precedent, following state law, and creating some great new business opportunities.
Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just personally, I feel the nature of the current conversation kind of implies that we're doing something that perhaps we shouldn't be doing as a city. So that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't think we are doing something that we shouldn't be doing in the way that we use these dollars. But I don't like the implication of that. And I think sometimes that implication comes from the community when there's a lack of understanding of how the district was created, what the intent was of the funds, how the program works. So I just think there's probably something we can do, if for no other reason, just to help the commissioners be able to articulate and answer questions as they come up. I don't know that we need to do some huge communication on it, but that would be helpful. And one of the things that I think would help with that, so that we're sure that we're getting to all the points, is to have Member Risser, and I'm not saying we should do this now, give a little bit more detail on some of the specifics of what she has heard from those residents so that we can specifically educate the commissioners on those concerns and what we have done. So we shouldn't do that today, but I would feel more comfortable if we spend some time kind of framing that so that we're all on the same page.
Here's Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to say, one of the values of Edina is our small businesses, especially retail businesses, the quality of retailers that we have here, the experiences that people can have when they come here to spend their money, whether it's for shopping or for dining. I am super excited about this. I love crepes. I love they're from Brittany. And this is why our retail districts are so vibrant. We talk a lot about wanting to have these experiences with small local owners and having opportunities to enjoy ourselves and for them to thrive. And so this, I think, is just such a wonderful program to express that value that I hear a lot from people in our community. So thank you.
Commissioner?
Thank you. I'm very excited for this. Love the passion that you bring, love the story that you have, and also love how I do really think that it ties into this existing kind of community and structure there. So I'm excited that we have this opportunity as a city to invest into these small businesses. I kind of echo Commissioner Pierce's, I think, line of questioning of like, what can we do to encourage more of this, especially knowing that we have that limited time on the program. But I know that you're doing what you can, and I know that we as a city are looking for more of those opportunities. So just want to see continued investment and really excited for this project. Thank you.
Commissioner Agnew. Just a reminder, I think, is what reinforce what you said, and that is this is a creature of the legislature that decided that during a difficult economic time in our state, we could do some things with unallocated TIF funds that would allow us to provide jobs for construction workers, provide jobs for people that are going into a new business that's been rehabilitated, and where those funds might have otherwise been used for the purpose intended in that TIF district. So they would never have gone back to the county. We got a chance to consolidate some of those funds in our community to be used in a different way to build strength and economic vitality and vibrancy in our community through its small businesses, as my colleagues have mentioned. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity afforded to us by the legislature. And what we don't use, I mean, you've been doing a very thorough job of deciding what to bring to us, to talk to us about in terms of grants or loans or forgivable loans. And I think you've done really terrific work so far. And what we don't use by December 31, 2025, it'll be coming back to us in part, to the county in part. And it sounds like with the school district, they're going to get it, but it's going to be taken away. So they're kind of they're net neutral on this thing, really, in terms of revenue. So I favor it as well. And I thought Commissioner Agnew said it well, and that's why I wanted to have the owner come up, having visited with her this winter. You could just see the passion for the work that she does, and I think having that business in Edina is going to be a wonderful thing. So we've got a motion and a second to approve the grant agreement for OCREP. All those in favor of approving the grant agreement with OCREP LLC, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The grant agreement with OCREP LLC is approved. And then the next one that we've heard about is the Arbor Sunnyside Properties LLC, which allows us to assist in creating more accessibility into those buildings for people with disabilities. So let's see if there's someone who cares to make a motion to approve the grant agreement with Arbor Sunnyside Properties LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Agnew moves, Member Pierce seconds the approval of the grant agreement with Arbor Sunnyside Properties LLC. Any discussion on this matter? All right. All those in favor of the approval of the grant agreement with Arbor Sunnyside Properties LLC, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion is approved, 4-1. Grant agreement with Arbor Sunnyside Properties LLC is approved. Thank you for both being here this morning. And now we're going to move on to the next matter that Manager Neuendorf has, and that involves 5146 Eden Avenue.
Yes, thank you.
Just one, as you leave here, so what kind of a schedule are we on for opening the OCREP?
Depending
All right, very good. Still on that schedule. Okay. All right, thank you. All right. Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Nudorf. Go ahead.
No worries. So our next item is not for action, but for discussion. I wanted to provide an update to you on our efforts and our strategy to secure a new housing developer at the old Public Works site, 5146 Eden. We are preparing a full RFP document, request for proposal. We're aiming to get that out prior to Memorial Day, so in about a week and a half. But before I actually issue it and release it, I just wanted to have the discussion so that we're all generally aiming at the same point and have a shared understanding. That being said, the document is not finished. It hasn't been released, and it's still subject to change. So I welcome your comments, suggestions, and other input. So I'll walk through this. I'll try to do it quickly in the interest of time. We all know the site. So the purpose of a request for proposal, what we're aiming to do is issue the RFP to secure a housing developer or perhaps a team of housing developers to work collaboratively with. So RFPs can be written a number of different ways. Sometimes you say, we want exactly this, give us your best price and your best schedule. I don't think we're there yet. We've had conversations about generally what we're looking for, a combination of townhomes, really focusing on for sale opportunities. We could live with some multifamily. We're not interested in having just a lot of traditional apartments that we've seen, because there's great supply of that throughout the city and the metro area, but we are looking for something unique. In order to achieve our vision, we're going to have to find a partner first and then work through what's the scale, what's the mass, what's the price point, what's the land worth based on that. So I just wanted to be clear that when we select a developer, we'll have an estimate of the land value, but that will still be negotiated throughout the final zoning process. We'll issue the RFP to make sure that we're open and transparent about what we're doing, who we're looking for, and what we want to achieve. Of course, when it comes to land value, we still want to maximize our value for our community. When it comes to working through the site plan process, we'll use the city's traditional zoning review process that we use for any project. Nothing more, nothing less, but what our typical process would be. And then again, to be clear, that the purchase price would be negotiated as we go through that. We've had success using that model in the past. Again, when you select the developer, you can tell some folks that you're going to work well with, others you're not going to work well with. So we want to invite and talk with a number of different options. The development program that we've discussed in the last several months really has 4 distinct elements that are all woven together. So fundamentally, with a public green space, currently it's shown on the northern edge of the site. There'd be a full-service restaurant with indoor and outdoor dining. There'd be a minimal amount of shared parking on the property. Some private parking for the residential, but shared parking for the restaurant, and then taking advantage of that parking garage that exists already just across the tracks. The housing, as we discussed a few months ago, is really prioritizing owner-occupied units, and then configured in the arrangement that I mentioned earlier. Each of those 4 elements would all be woven together in a walkable community. So with comfortable setbacks, comfortable public realm spaces, landscape boulevards, broad sidewalks, with thought and intention to bicycle access through the area as well. But it's those 4 elements we want to bring to the attention of the developers. As far as background, all the typical rules apply. The Grandview 7 guiding principles, the city's affordability and sustainable building policies would apply. Comp plan, zoning code, PUD rezonings, stormwater engineering, all those typical things apply. Nothing higher, nothing lower, all those typical requirements. For the site plan, based on what we've heard so far, and discussed so far, we'd be looking at a lower massing, lower height along the street edge. Taller height could be acceptable if it's in the center, but in the past, you mentioned the importance of having something lower scale along the street with a comfortable setback. So the setback from curb to the building face, about 20 feet. We've seen good examples at 16 feet. We've seen good examples at 22 feet. It's somewhere in there, and I think we want to give the developer and their architectural team flexibility to really work with the site. With the restaurant location, we've seen it in a couple different options. The restaurant could remain where it currently is. We looked at one option when we hired a designer to possibly shift it down to Eden to get a lower scale facility along Eden. If the developer wants to move it from its current location, they would have to work well with Jester Concepts, who still has the contract for the restaurant. So Jester's understanding of the process, they're willing to be collaborative. They could live in either spot as long as the site works for them and for us. But I want to bring that to the attention of the developers. And then fundamentally, the grade change. We've got a deal, it's a 34-foot drop from top northern edge to the southern edge. We need to incorporate that into the site plan, and if possible, bury some parking in that to try to take advantage. The townhome program, we looked at a rendering before. I'll share it in a minute. It's in your packet. But really focusing on for sale units is what I'm going to ask for. Both myself and Stephanie Hawkinson have talked to a number of different developers that do lots of different things. A lot of folks that want to build rental townhomes. And at this point, we're expecting to say no thank you to rental townhomes, but really focusing on for sale. Our current massing studies show you could get 1 or 2 dozen units there, depending on how you configure them. The price point is going to be the most important thing in this RFP. So we've heard the discussion that you had in the past. What Stephanie Hawkinson and myself recommend is targeting price points of those townhomes to meet a variety of income groups. 10% of the units would be priced at 80% AMI, which meets the true HUD definition of an affordable ownership unit. 40% of the units would be what some people call Edina affordable, 120% of AMI, and then the other half of the units would be market rate. So we're not expecting to have high luxury combined with 120 AMI and 80% AMI. Someone that's going to buy a $2 million townhome is going to have a whole different set of expectations than we think we want to deliver here. But by targeting these 3 price points, we think we can convey to the developers our intention of having a variety of unit sizes and prices. We'd also be looking at securing long-term affordability of those affordable units by building in a limited equity model. So for example, you couldn't just flip it for a $30,000 profit the next year. Your equity would be capped over time. We've seen that used successfully in other places. We also have seen that turn off a lot of developers because buyers just want to do what they want. So I'm sure that'll be a point of conversation once we secure a developer and go through the site planning process. For the townhomes, we're also looking at limited shared amenities to hold down the fees. So we don't expect a pool room. We don't expect a clubhouse. We don't expect lots of different amenities that just jack up the HOA fees. We want a community that's affordable and predictable. We'd also be looking at some variation in architectural style, height, and massing of that project, and high-quality materials like brick or stone. Now, always bear in mind, brick and stone are also the most expensive things out there for finishes, so there'll be some trade-offs there. For the affordable units, if we really want affordability, but want the highest quality materials, we're probably going to have to offer some type of pricing concession. No developer is going to build a unit knowing that they're going to lose a couple $100,000 on that unit. So I think we'll have a lot of conversation, but at this point, since the HRA owns the land, we can pick and choose what's most important for us. And we might be willing to go down on our price on the land if we get the product that we're looking for. So that's why I'm recommending an RFP that doesn't have a firm fixed price, but we want to find that partner that we can work with. And then if there's a multifamily component, we've spoken with developers that build co-ops, condos, and rentals. Condo market's tough, close to impossible. The senior co-op model still might work here, but I think at a lower price point than our former housing partner was looking at. And rental apartments, certainly there's still strong interest, strong demand in this area. So that might be a concession we might want to consider when we see our options. I do recommend that we keep that as an option, the rental. We might choose to say no, but I think if we exclude them, I think we're going to get little to no response from any developer in the Twin Cities. Unit sizes, very similar to the townhomes, really focused on a more mid-priced, mid-scale project. We updated a couple of the renderings that we prepared as property owner. I mentioned this when we spoke a couple months ago. There's a lot of flaws in this drawing. It could not be built this way, but we wanted to give the developers some kind of idea what we might have in mind. So this is the combination of townhomes and one layout of a multifamily along with the restaurant and the green space. Here's another layout, different configuration. We put height here, but we buried it in the middle, surrounded by lower scale townhomes. Again, restaurant and green space are always in there. And then for illustrative purposes, we created a cross section to help and make sure the developers understand the challenges of this particular site. So again, this rendering, not the prettiest thing in the world, but we want, the idea is that we're not going to build this, but we want to give developers a sense of some of the challenges so that when they actually submit a proposal to us, they are fully informed of the challenges, the opportunities, and a lot of the hurdles on this site. So we'll ask each developer to submit a formal application with some general information and some specific information. We do want to ask them for their price target and how they got there, and any hurdles they see to increase or decrease that price. We don't want to be completely surprised at the end, but we do want to be collaborative and find a good partner. The process to review this is similar to what we've done in the past. Initially, to make sure that the Edina HRA as a property owner and seller, we want to make sure that we're not showing our cards to the buyers. So initially, these proposals are going to be reviewed in a non-public setting. We don't want to share with developer A what developer B proposed until we're under contract with that developer that we like. Then it could become public. But in that initial phase, we want to be private with that. Once we start getting real and start having a real agreement and start flushing out contracts, that's when we want to make sure we're transparent, open, and above board, and that's when those documents become more public-facing. But there would be a time where they would be not available to the general public. Our schedule is moving fast. We want to get this released at the end of May, give developers 4 to 5 weeks to respond. Then we, because they're waiting, they're ready, they're waiting for us. But then we would review the proposals, aim to be under contract this fall, and then move forward with a new sketch plan and moving forward on the next version. Each of these things takes time. So even starting now, we are looking at completion in phases 2026 and 2027. So that's why we want to keep this ball moving. So in a nutshell, that's where we're aiming. I just want to be transparent with you about what we think we can really expect. But again, if there's things that you want differently, things I should emphasize or de-emphasize, I'm happy to hear that. And with Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Folks comfortable with this concept or question? You member, Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Risser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I have actually a lot of comments on this. Let's go to the townhome list of things. My vision for this had been affordable ownership opportunities and having 50% of them priced at market rate. You know, what we've seen across the street from this site over on Hankerson are $1.2 million townhomes, $900,000 townhomes. That is not what I had in mind at all for this. And to have 50% of them looking at $1 million homes is way outside of what my expectations were. Now, and I'll defer to my my peers here on this about the finish. I don't think that they need to be super fancy. I think having an ownership opportunity on what was formerly public land is maximizing value for me. So I really am not looking forward to having $1 million townhomes built on this site. So that's my first point. The second is, in these renderings you've put together, I don't see anything looking even remotely like that getting through the Planning Commission. We talk about mixed use, and it's okay to have horizontal mixed use, but having that big bulky building in the middle says this is not mixed use. We are putting a barrier up. So in the previous plan, it had that feeling of, you know, Confluence was able to go from the park down across, even into the housing, a sense of green and continuity. Having those buildings block things off in the middle, you don't feel that this is a campus. This is not unified. There's this big wall. So even if, you know, you could go a little higher and open up that space, I know we want to maximize the underground parking there. I think the Planning Commission would like that if we used the underground space, and I think that's a big part of Jester Concepts' ideas for that as well, to have that underground saloon. Or the speakeasy, I think is what they called it. But the flow on this site in what we would be giving to developers, I think would not pass through what the Planning Commission was expecting for this. So it really feels chunky, as opposed to here is this wonderful new area that we're going to be giving our city. So having that sense of campus and flow between the different parts of it is missing. But with the townhomes, I would much prefer to have them be affordable than to be fancy, because that's something that's absolutely missing in our city, and we have the opportunity here to do something about that. So let me just look at my notes here. I think that's it. Oh, and then can you run this by the Housing Foundation? Probably, I don't know if there's time to do that, but just to share it with them and maybe get email comments back from them. Oh, and that's the other thing with the rentals. When you talked with Manager Hawkinson, seems to me that when we get the inclusionary housing, they're all the 10% at 50% of AMI. This is an opportunity for us to balance things out. So can we ask for units that are, you know, below 50% AMI, or all of them at 60% of AMI? I would defer to her for what kind of balance she'd like to see, but I would like to see this is our opportunity to make a difference in the market. The market's giving us the 10% at 50% of AMI. What do we want? How do we balance out those numbers? And what can we do in our RFP to do that? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Risser.
I agree with my colleague, Commissioner Jackson, and Commissioner Jackson, sorry. It's hard to, and I do need to leave at 9 o'clock today, so I don't want people thinking I'm storming out. I have someplace I have to go. And one thing I do want to caution, assuming that if there's no pool or, you know, amenities, we're going to have a reasonable HOA is not necessarily true. There is a townhouse development in Edina that has, it's just townhouses and very little green space, and they are asking for $900 a month in HOA fees. So just that little caution right there. This is kind of, and I'm going to apologize, I feel like this is sort of a spin straw into gold request, but it'd be so great if there was a way to create affordable housing that did not involve an HOA. And I don't know if that's possible or not, but, since we're having these conversations, that would just be a wonderful thing. And I keep thinking about, could we really encourage smaller architecture on this site? It seems like we keep getting townhouses that are so large, and this kind of plays into what Commissioner Jackson just noted, but it makes so much sense to try to scale back a little bit, and come up with a design that doesn't require so much space. And also I'm wondering, thinking about energy use, all of that, is so important, and it's going to continue to be even more and more important. So just having that there. And also thinking about homes that have handicapped accessibility, to the degree that that's possible, not, that you could have everything on one level. So with that, I think that's all I have to say. And
Thank you, Commissioner Risser. Commissioner Agnew?
Thank you. I for the most part, like the spread of the numbers here. I like having market rate housing as a part of this project, whether it be within the townhomes and or within whatever might be at a higher scale. And I also, asking for a lot here, think it would be good, even if we think about the townhomes, to have one or two, depending on the total number, that is even below that. So I don't know if 50% or 60% AMI is like the right phrasing, but something that we're building and then selling at cost and really trying to minimize that cost. Because I like creating not just 100% affordable housing and really bringing people together, and creating that type of environment where we have all of those levels. And so that's why that in particular is important to me. Even though I do hear, Commissioner Jackson, your point as well of like, we just need more affordable units. But I also don't want to just put them all in one place, is kind of the balance that I'm trying to strike. And then the other thing that I really liked about what Commissioner Jackson said, and so I just want to echo that, is making it feel like a campus, bringing it together, uniting it so that it doesn't feel like here's one piece, here's another piece, and then here's this other different piece. And I do think that there are ways to mix and mingle the affordability with the fancy. If it's looking fancy on the outside and then on the inside is where, the quality of the finishes are really varied, might be one way to target that. But overall, I really like the idea of this plan. I like the idea of going out and getting input. I think it's going to be important, and I'm sure you're already on top of this, right? As we're scoring these RFPs, keeping in mind what are the things that are most important to us as a city, and what are those ones that we can give and take a little bit on. And so I hope that we can be a part of that process, and obviously with those closed sessions, it looks like we will be. But it's really fun to think about us taking this next step. So thank you for bringing it to this point on the journey.
Thank you. Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I just got a few comments. I am also okay with market, but I'm coming at it from a different perspective. I actually agree with Commissioner Jackson that we wouldn't want $1 million homes there, right? But when I think about market, I'm thinking median price. And so if that is our median home value is $660, so I'm thinking of it that way. And so I think when you described it, you talked about amenities, finishes to kind of manage that cost. That's the way I think of it. And so I think it's important to actually give that balanced comment to them that we understand you may need to do some market to bring a viable product. However, these are the price points, the ranges that we're thinking about. And so that's one. The second, I want options to come to us that we can actually do. And so I do think we're at a point, or we're nearing a point where, as a council and as a commission, our paradigm is going to have to change if we want anything there at all. And so as you go through, I think it is smart to do RFP, but I think we need a balance of being more prescriptive of generalities of what we want to see and some specifics, like we want ownership. We need to be clear about how we define that so that we don't get $1 million homes, but we get something that hits the missing middle. But then I also think we should, and I don't know how to do this, but because I think our paradigm is going to have to shift, I'd be happy if developers said, well, all right, this meets your RFP. However, here's an idea of something that you might want to consider that is marketable, that maybe hits, I don't know, 60% or some percent of the things that we're looking for, but maybe totally different from any other renderings that you have. And so what I'm getting at is, let's be clear on the words, but we don't want to, I think we don't want to have developers kind of thinking with blinders on in the current paradigm of trying to get this thing to fit that has already not worked multiple times, so that we get subject matter that we can actually work with. So that would be, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. From a conceptual standpoint, doing an RFP, I'm okay with that. I think Commissioner Pierce has raised an interesting issue, and that is, I'm thinking about what we did years ago over on what was then 49.5 Street, Market Street. We said we wanted development on the north side of 49.5 Street that dealt with that ramp over there. And what we got from Pete Dinovic and Nolan Maines was this whole idea that we didn't even have in our head, was to take everything down in the middle. We hadn't even thought about that middle ramp, and redo the whole thing. And so I don't want to limit the imagination of potential developers coming in here either, because we may see something that is extraordinary. And I can still remember the sense of the council when we saw what they proposed for basically 50th in France was a total overhaul. So if you give them too many layouts to work off of, they might feel constrained. So I'd look, and I don't remember what we did on 49.5 Street in terms of that RFP, because we had about a half a dozen responders, I remember. And all of them just dealt with that one piece of property on the north side of the street. It was these other guys that came along with this idea out of left field that we really embrace. So keep that in mind. I will say, from having this experience over the last couple of years with our council here, I don't even know if we're headed in the right direction anymore, because we've got two projects stalled out on France Avenue that are housing related. The one across the street from our old public works site has cratered out. And so I don't even know if housing works anymore, which has pushed me back to thinking about some of the things we talked about several years ago, including the idea of something that activates the street. That was what former member Staunton always used to talk about. Let's make sure we activate that area. Was this idea of what they had, is it Chaska, with the curling rinks and the brew pub, so you can almost see yourself driving down Eden with big glass windows, people inside playing, doing curling, or little kids even, I suppose, in a curling rink. You could even have mites in there doing hockey games. You know, they don't need much space. And then you got a brew pub. So to me, there's things that we could probably think about doing again as we kind of reset what to do with this property. And if we took two-thirds of it or half of it and incorporated gestures in a brew pub or a microbrewery as part of a city project on our own land, that takes us in a totally different direction. So, but maybe the smart thing to do is to go with your RFP that you worked so hard on. Keep in mind not limiting the creativity of people or development companies that come along. Let them think about the affordability mix, and then let's see if we like any of it. But keep in the back of our minds that we may want to go a totally different direction. This has been 12 years of going in totally different directions, or 15 years, I don't know. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought of something else that actually you, Mr. Chair, talk about quite a bit, and that is a building that is tall and thin with green space as opposed to a big blocky building. And I know we've talked about limiting it to the top of the Jerry's office tower, but if you have to have a certain number of units to make it profitable, I would be willing to give up or give on height to get more green space and that flow. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So,
So that, Commissioner Jackson caused me to think about one other thing I wanted to mention in conjunction with the RFP, and that was, I personally don't care if it's a mix of multifamily and townhouses. When I look at your layout A, I like the neighborhood sort of feel as generated by the townhouses. And so, to me, I wouldn't care if it was all townhouses, just a townhouse ownership project. Forget about the 7-story buildings and the multifamily, because you're going to have a really wonderful neighborhood feel out of townhouses alone, I think, or even the cottage homes, where you've got them on 0 lot lines, but you've created a neighborhood with cottage homes around common area spaces, which goes to the green space notion. But let the developers think about that. And we've got flexibility to be a good partner because we own the land.
Right.
And we can sell it for a high price or a medium price or a low price, depending on what we see that we like. For example, hypothetically, a townhouse project that we really like that encompassed all of the property that we're thinking about here, a third of it, and to make it work, we had to sell it at a lower price. Well, and I think our council would think hard about that. So, anyway, those are my thoughts. Commissioner Agnew also had some follow-on.
I do, because the second you start thinking about a community gathering location on this site again, Mayor, I do get really excited. I know that it's been a really long journey, but I just want to say thank you for saying that. And I absolutely would be excited about potentially 1/3 being townhomes and then rekindling some of that idea of community gathering. And we don't need to pack the site with just density if we can get some of these other things that we want. So I think you said creativity, or maybe when you spoke, I heard creativity, but keep open for that creativity and that wiggle room in this RFP. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe their ticket to the party is some ideas that based on your RFP, but to stay at the party, they got to bring a creative idea too. Because I do believe our paradigm is going to have to shift, and like you've just seen it shift in the last 10 minutes. Yeah.
So if I can just interject, so happy to make all those changes. That's super helpful to the process. Just so we're aware, if we ask them to bring the creative idea to create a community space, they will be asking us to pay for and bond for debt to build and operate that space. Is that what you're open to?
Say that again.
If we ask them to give us creative ideas to build a community activity space, their response would be to ask us for bonding, for funding, and for operating costs for that space. is that what you're asking me to ask for?
Well, I don't know if Commissioner Agnew was thinking about it being indoors or outdoors or both. And I was open on that, but it seems to me the price of the land is a factor that would come into play there too. But I could definitely understand where if we're going to do something that was indoor, that we may have to think about, the cost of that to community. Commissioner?
That's a hard no for me. We've got 2 fire stations to build, and we don't want to, I don't want to push the debt capacity beyond what we've already got planned. And we've got Braemar Clubhouse that needs to be updated. We have a pool that needs to be updated. So absolutely not. I would be against bonding and operating. And I liked when we brought in a private partner in Gesture Concepts, and I'm not willing to take on more bonding for this.
Commissioner?
I hear you, and I don't have a strong opinion that is against your opinion. But I think that there are, as we're talking about, maybe a microbrew is not the right one, just because I think that Gesture Concepts was still thinking about like a speakeasy or something in the basement. But I do think that there are private organizations who would be excited about building something. So I don't think that those have to necessarily be at odds of, if we're not willing to bond for it, we can't get anything that's going to bring people together. I don't think that that's the case. And so that's where I'd like to see some of that creativity. And you can sit here and you can think about, and I've said before with other sites, like a comedy club or something that's just like a gathering site, and less of, housing that 90% of the people are going to drive past, unless, of course, they live there or they're visiting someone there. So that's my goal.
And then I would just add, I don't want the question in the way that we ask it to stifle the creativity. And so I'm kind of in the middle, and I would just say it depends on what the community benefit is and what any particular ask might be. If I think about it right now and I give you my confidence factor, I kind of feel like this site is going to sit vacant. I don't know if we're really going to get ideas that we're going to be able to move forward with. I'm hoping that we do. But right now I have a fairly low confidence factor. So I wouldn't want to have a stipulation that stifles other creative ideas coming in. And then, I balance that with, I also don't want to waste a lot of time looking at sketch plans that we know we either can't fund or can't get approved. So I'm kind of in the middle there, but those would be my comments on that.
That's very helpful. So thank you for putting some guardrails on there. I will incorporate more creativity and encourage additional creativity, and I will make sure I distribute a copy of the RFP to each of you and to the general public when it's out there. So give us maybe a couple weeks now to do that. So, thank you, Chair.
Got some quick updates for us, Mr. Executive Director?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Neuendorf has 2 of them, and I have the last one.
Okay. All
if
right.
if we have time.
Very good.
Do we have time to do these today, or we want us to?
Be out of here, yeah.
Okay.
I could, 15 minutes, I don't know how the rest of the.
Sure. Well, I'll start, and these will be brief. So I just wanted to bring a couple things to your attention of things to expect to see in the future. So as we talked about that Spark program, I use the term business subsidy. Our city attorney reminds us that the city's business subsidy policy was written in 2011, and it made great sense in 2011 when it was written. Times have changed, laws have changed, and it's time to update that. So we are in that process. So far, the projects we've supported financially have all met exceptions to that policy. So that's why we've been able to postpone this update. But do look for an update in the near future. The way the state law is written, that policy update starts at the city council with a public hearing. So usually financial matters start with this group, but in this particular case, I'll start at the city council level with information posted to our Better Together website first. We'll hold a public hearing. After the city council does its confirmation and review, it'll then come to this body second. So expect to see that this summer. And at this point, we don't have any intention or specific projects to support with business subsidies, but we want to keep that door open just in case.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes, so, thank you. When you're putting this together, I know you'll do this, but I have to say it anyways, make sure to put in definitions of what is a business subsidy and those different levels and what triggers it. The other thing is if we can have a list of suggested public purposes, so it's not, all encompassing, but to give people an idea of what we're talking about when we say public purposes, I think that would be very helpful as well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Great, thank you. My second update is regarding tax increment financing. So earlier this year, we asked our state legislators to bring some legislation forward to give additional time to the 70th in France TIF district and the 72nd in France #2 TIF district. Each of those proposals are winding its way through the system, so we've been to the Capitol to testify on a few occasions. But at this point, both the House and the Senate have adopted the city's requested language. So we expect that to be included in a bill that's signed by the governor eventually, hopefully next week. When that, after it becomes law, then it'll come back to the city council and the HRA to affirm. There's some provisions that also require approval of the school district and the county. So I think we'll have more discussions on that in the future, but right now we're on the path to at least give the community an option if we want to expand those districts, or not expand, but extend those districts. And the key reason why we asked for the special legislation was to deal with this time delay, right? When we approved these projects almost 2.5 years ago, they would have been in the ground, they would have been above ground, framed out, and looking at delivery dates. And the economy has changed that timeline. So with this change in state law, we extend that timeline for the developments to start and be finished. And just to put this in context, this year Edina is one of 11 different cities statewide that is asking for changes like this. It's not unusual. A lot of other projects are in this boat. We wish we weren't, but we are. But it looks like we might have flexibility to extend. So as we learn more, we'll bring that to your attention. And for our last update, I'll turn that over to our Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. In 2022, the city made, the HRA made a loan of $610,000 to the Edina Chamber of Commerce to help fund a location, physical improvements to a building that would be used to house not just Explore Edina, the Chamber of Commerce, but also Innovation Lab. Part of the innovation, our loan went to the chamber. Part of the chamber's plan was that the Innovation Lab would have produced income that would help them service the debt back to the city. That hasn't, there's been success at the Innovation Lab, but not to the fiscal extent that this is looking like it's going to work out. So the chamber board has been talking about how to restructure to provide more opportunities, more income streams for the Innovation Lab from the private sector. And one of the strategies is to reform the Innovation Lab as a B Corp, as a private benefit corporation. So there's some discussion going on about that at the Chamber Board. It looks like it's going to move forward in that regard, although there's still some formal changes. One of those formal changes needs to come back to the HRA to consider restructuring the loan that we made to them. We've had some discussions about that, But when we get a proposal that we're comfortable with as staff and they're comfortable with as a chamber board, we have to bring that back to the HRA. So this is more just an update and a heads up that we'll be discussing that sometime this summer.
The other thing I think we can say is that they've made one payment. I think the payments are around $45,000. There's a loan forgiveness element to it. They qualify, I think, presently for maybe a $90,000 reduction on the loan payback because of the time frame involved. You might have that better in your mind than I do.
You're correct. There are two conditions of forgiveness. We could forgive up to $250,000 when they achieve certain milestones. They're on their way. They haven't hit the milestone yet, but they're certainly on the way. And that's part of, I think, the overall strategy is how to package, deliver the things that they could get forgiveness for, and then keep the ball rolling. So we're certainly in conversation with them about that.
I think the second payment is due in July, and they expect to be able to make that payment without a problem. And then as this thing gets reset, whatever the balance of that loan might be, assuming they meet the forgiveness requirements, we've got a guarantor on the balance of the loan, so the city's in good shape there. That's what we're hearing so far. So.
And that's all I have.
All right. Anything else from commissioners? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Oh, second.
Commissioner Jackson or Commissioner Agnew moves to adjourn. The other is seconding. And all those in favor of adjourning say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. And adjourned.